Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last live session of the week on Friday morning. So if you're new to these, we do these 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Quick look at the markets, see what's going on, what's moving, the levels to watch, all that sort of stuff. There's only one major announcement today, but it could be a big one. It's due out at 1:30 UK time, and it's US GDP growth. So how much did the US economy grow in the first quarter? So that's out an hour ahead of the official US Open. So I think the expectation is for growth of about 1.8%. So I think at 1:30, expecting at least a bit of volatility off the back of that one. Let me just put the risk warning up. And apart from that, nothing else, not on the major economic front. Anyway, let's have a quick look. We've got earnings from Chevron, ExxonMobil. Okay, so big oil companies today. Colgate, Palmolive, Total as well. So so lots of oil earnings today. So it could still be a pretty volatile afternoon. We'll start off looking at oil. I think the title for this, when it gets recorded, is oil making a top? Because of course it's YouTube and we've got to do a clickbait title. So that'll be one of the first markets we'll look at. We'll take a look at the price of oil and then we'll get into everything else. We saw a big fall, I think, for Intel in after hours trade last night, the chip manufacturer, because I think they downgraded their forecasts. I think so it's interesting. I think we saw a bit of pressure on the Nasdaq, so that could be an interesting market. But let's get started. I think that risk warning has been up for long enough, so let's get into it. So let's start off with this oil price, as that's the focus for the title today. I think it's interesting. Oil clearly it has moved. It's just ripped higher all this year. The price of oil, it's up $20. It's $20 higher than it was in December. We've seen pretty much a 50% plus move in the price of oil. And along the way, we've not had much in the way of sell-offs. At the moment, it's down. You can see it's the third day on the trot. The oil price is down. And to have the last time we saw oil slide for 3 days, hang on a second, is here. So March the 21st. So it's been a month since we last see oil move lower for 3 days. I mean, today isn't over yet. So, it could still recover. And for me, I think it's too early to call a top. I think there has to come a point, as with these other markets, like the S&P, for example, where the strength has to stop and we've got to have a half decent sell-off. But for now, I don't think we're getting it. So for me, for oil, I'd still be looking for the buying opportunities. Let's just flip it out. I'm just going to send a message to someone because we normally send a push out to clients on these webinars, but it's not come through on my phone. There we go. So here we go. So this is where we are in oil. So April the 23rd, so 3 days ago, we saw highs for the year above $66.50, so $66.55. So the market's lost a couple of dollars over the last couple of days. But I think where it's interesting, clearly, looking at previous big levels, looking at where we were before the latest breakout on oil, we saw stacks of support from the second week of April the 8th, April the 15th, April the 16th, ahead of 63. So I think if we did see it under a bit more pressure for the rest of today, I think it makes for a really interesting setup next week. So personally, it'd be all right if it went a bit lower than here for me, and then looking for some strength to see if we start to see strength coming in ahead of $63 a barrel, and for it to have another push higher. If it starts losing 63, well, then we've got support left at 62, and then we're back to 58s. But for me at the moment, I would be expecting the bounce ahead of this level. Famous last words. I don't think it's going to go just sailing through $63 a barrel, because I think there's still that FOMO, that fear of missing out with many of these markets, because they have rocketed higher, that there should, in theory, be a queue of people just waiting to buy in on any weakness. So let's see. I think it's an interesting market to watch today, particularly as we have the likes of Chevron and Exxon's earnings out a bit later on today. So that's the oil price, bit weaker, but looking for the snapback. I think it'll be an interesting one on Monday morning, and we'll be watching next week, assuming 63 doesn't get taken out today. I think that'll be the level that we'll be focusing on from the beginning of next week. So there we go. It's crude oil. So a little bit weaker, but looking for the bounce. Let's get into the other markets. What should we do? What should we do next? Let's start off maybe that dollar index. We spent a lot of time on Wednesday looking at that dollar index, saying is it going to break out? And I said it's a really interesting market to watch, because rather than it being euro dollar, pound dollar, dollar yen, it's the US dollar against a basket of other currencies. So euro, pound, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, yen, they're all in there. And if you want to see the exact breakdown, just look on Wikipedia for dollar index, and it's got the breakdown there. But we have seen this breakout. We had this just to remind ourselves what the US dollar has been doing. 2017 was the worst year for the US dollar in more than a decade, but it really came back in 2018. From April last year, the US dollar really started moving, and it rallied almost 10% into the end of the year. So that's putting pressure on the pound, putting pressure on the euro, putting pressure on gold, all of that stuff. And then since then, sells off, bobbles around a bit. And I think when we were looking at that US interest rate decision, whenever it was it about a month ago maybe? And I said it was interesting that the US dollar index, maybe it was here, had sold off really sharply when the US central bank said, we're not going to raise rates again this year, or gave a broad hint that was what they're going to do. And you'd expect that to be negative for the dollar. But what was interesting was it just rallied back and clawed back all the losses over the next day and a half. So it did suggest a really strong dollar. And we're seeing it continue. So this break up through 98, I think it could be a major one, this. I think, okay, we're only a couple of days through this. Maybe we want to see what happens with a pullback here. If we pull back and then bang, we go higher again, it does look like we're starting the leg of a next sort of major move higher for the dollar. So it's really interesting here. Still, I suppose the contrarian trade is you view this as a false break and you sell short. So you sell short at 98.20 and you put a stop above yesterday's high somewhere above 98.50, that sort of area. But for me, I think it has been strong. This is a major break. Okay, looking on the RSIs, it is overbought, as you'd expect, after the run we've seen. We were overbought back here, that was a top. Overbought back here, that was a top as well. So maybe we will see a bit of cooling off for the US dollar going into next week. But I would be very tempted, if it starts to drift, looking for the buyers to come in and looking to hop on, looking for another push back up and see if we can break out to new highs again. So I think it's a really interesting market. This one to watch for the rest of today, particularly with that US GDP data at 1:30. That is going to have an impact, you would have thought, on the US dollar. So we could have a volatile trading session for this. But to look at some short-term levels, that's the dailies we're looking at. We've got the lows for yesterday. So after the breakout, trades a bit sideways. Lows just ahead of 98. Let's say 98 is short-term support. Then after that, bigger support down at sort of 97.50, 97.60. But I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch next week as well. But definitely today with that GDP thing at 1:30. So look at the euro. So this euro has slipped again to its worst level, euro against the dollar, since June 2017. So it keeps doing this to euro. It's I think it's an odd market at the moment, the way it's acting, because it keeps slipping like it did back here. Actually, let's go right back, because what we're seeing now is what we've seen over the last 8 months or so. So we had this low in August at 113. The market rallies, and then it breaks. Okay, it breaks a major level. Traditionally, that's a big sell signal, but then it recovers. Then it comes back down to it again in March, so last month, breaks the level, and then it recovers. And we've seen the same thing happening again. So we've seen break this big support. Actually, it did tick a little bit lower yesterday. But I think there's a couple of ways of playing this. Again, if it's almost the inverse of the contrarian dollar index trade. You could say, well, actually, this is just another false break lower by the euro. This is another overreaction by the euro. So an aggressive trade would be you'd be a buyer wherever it is now, 111.43, and you put a stop underneath that low, and the low is 111.17. So maybe the other side of 111, if you think that the market has overreacted. Okay, but I think if we see it starting to push through 111, it finally looks like a proper break on euro US dollar. So I think it's going to be another interesting one to watch next week. So I think stuff particularly, FX has been quite quiet for quite a few months, it feels like. So maybe things will start to spark up a little bit now. But it's interesting that the euro yet again has hit a 22-month low. Will we get the follow through this time round? Pound against the dollar. Let's have a look at that. Then we'll have a look at stock markets. We'll have a look at Intel today as well. We'll have a look at their shares. So pound against the dollar, it's a little bit boring. I think we're waiting for the Brexit discussions to start again. It's still drifting, as of yesterday, drifting. We've got this old big support at about 127.70, the lows from the middle of February. It is looking pretty overbought down here, oversold, down here. But I mean, I've said earlier this week, I think it's a really difficult market to trade because everything can be moving along nicely. Suddenly a politician says something and bang, it just explodes in the other direction. So I just think it's a difficult market at the moment. But for me, if I was doing anything at the moment, I'd be waiting to see how it acts down here. Is there a buying opportunity with stops the other side of those Feb lows? But like I say, I don't think it's the greatest market in the world at the moment. Pound against the dollar. Let's see if next week sparks things up a bit more interesting. Let's take a look at let's look at stock markets because we have seen a calmer couple of days after that massive surge, whenever it was, Tuesday. Okay, so this is the S&P 500. So it's a really interesting area now where we are back up at these all-time highs, just above 29.40. Those are the all-time highs from September last year. So it really is break or bust time. If the market's going to turn around anywhere, surely we're here. If we are going to see people think, well, do you know what? Shares have gone far enough for now. Let's sell them. Then it's here, because we're back up. And it was a bit of a level back in Jan. This whole 2900 to 2940 level has been a problem area. So if you absolutely had to go short US stock markets, this is the place, and stop losses somewhere above those old highs. Saying all that, it's still pretty strong. But again, the market's yet to open, but we're currently on the third down day. And when did we have 3 down days in a row? We've got to go back a month again. So, but I think there could be an opportunity this afternoon in this one. So let's take a look on the hourly chart. So let's just get rid of the oscillator for now. So that was the big move on Tuesday. That was really an explosive move, and it's just drifted a bit since then. We had quite volatile trading yesterday, but I think maybe the opportunity today, we've got that US GDP data ahead of the market open. I think watch yesterday's low. So for me, I didn't do a trade in it yesterday, but coming into today, the low for yesterday on the S&P, we'll look at the Dow in a minute and the Nasdaq, but the low was about 29.12-ish at about 3:30 yesterday, and it ramped up 20 points off that level. So we saw, real turnaround at 29.12. And in the overnight market, so about 2 o'clock this morning in Asian trade, it drifted down to about 29.14 before bouncing back. So I think for today, watch that level. That's what I'm going to be watching. If we see it, maybe we get a bit of a negative reaction to the US GDP data or whatever, and we see it under a bit of pressure, sort of early doors, then I'll be watching. Let's watch down here and see how it reacts. But for me, that's maybe the opportunity. And I suppose if you want to short sell, if we get a bit of a pump up in the first couple of hours, we'll be looking at the highs from yesterday. The highs from yesterday around about 29.33. So I think we've got definite levels there to watch. When we've seen after this explosive move on Tuesday, a little bit unsure maybe since then, but clearly a sharp turnaround yesterday at 29.12 and sellers coming in at 29.33. So I think those are the bands to watch. But the big picture is, all right, it's sold off for a couple of days, but for now at least that trend still looks to be up for me. Let's have a look at the Dow and have a look at the Nasdaq. Then we'll have a look at Intel. Then we'll look at the European indices. So Dow Jones, let's bring that one up. So again, I'm expecting similar sort of shapes. So interesting, the Dow isn't near its all-time highs. All-time highs were October last year, up at 27,000 near enough. It has traded as high as 26.7 this week, but it's slipping back. So let's take a look. But again, clearly that recovery is still intact. It's the third day so far it's sold off. Let's have a look on the hourly charts. I mean, this is interesting. This coming into this afternoon for the Dow. There was definitely a clearer opportunity on the Dow yesterday than the S&P. Look at these lows from back here, April the 15th lows, and here actually as well, 26,300, April the 12th, April the 15th, whatever day that is, April the 18th, and again yesterday. So it's a massive level in the short term for the Dow, 26,300. So it's currently trading, it's nearly 100 points above that level, but the Dow can move 100 points really quickly. So again, an interesting one to watch if we see it under pressure this afternoon. If it starts to lose 26.3, we could see maybe a bit more of a dramatic end to the week. But at the moment, I'd be hoping there'd be a bit of weakness in the first couple of hours. See if it drifts back to the low 26,300s. Do we see the buyers come back in? And maybe there's a trade looking for a run back up to 26,500. So much clearer actually the Dow than the S&P in terms of looking at these big levels. Let's have a quick look at Intel, and then we will have a look at European markets. So we don't show after hours trading, I don't think, on Intel. But I think it was it hit hard in the after hours trading? I think it was. Let me just see if I can bring it up on another screen. I can't find it. But Intel, so Intel going into today, if we're watching stocks, what do we need to look out for? Well, it's quite interesting that like the Nasdaq, it had broken out to, I'm guessing that is fresh all-time highs for the Intel share price. So it had traded up to 60. So yesterday sold off to 57. And I think it was weaker in the overnight market. I don't know if anybody has got access to that, but let's see. So it'd be interesting to see how it trades today. If it's a lot weaker today, where do we see the buyers come back in? But that could be a market to watch. I said the Nasdaq, didn't I? Let's have a quick look at the Nasdaq. Then we'll look at the DAX and the FTSE. Let's bring that up. Here we go. So there again, there's the Nasdaq going out to fresh all-time highs. It did punch a bit higher again yesterday, and it reversed. So you can see. Let's get rid of that for now. You can see we pushed higher yesterday, reversed. That's a bearish engulfing that we've got going on there. But let's bring up the hourlies and look at maybe the Nasdaq levels going into today. So the Nasdaq has moved lower in the overnight market. It got hit a fair bit. So the official close was about 78.12, and in the next hour it did drop about 40 points in after hours trade. I'm assuming because of some of these after hours earnings results we had. So the Nasdaq, okay, a bit weak. It's been a bit weaker overnight, but clearly, look at that trend. Fantastic trend this month. So again, if we see it weaken today, let's see how it performs near maybe those overnight lows. But again, looking to see if these stock markets can snap things back as they have done all this year. Right, let's get a bit of a move on. We'll have a look at the DAX. I think I saw a question on DAX. Your thought monthly head and shoulders on DAX. Okay, so someone's saying, we'll have a look at this. Monthly head and shoulders on DAX. Left shoulder, 12,400. Head, 13,600. Right, let's have a look. Let's bring the dailies up first of all, then we'll have a look at that. I must admit, I am terrible at spotting those sort of patterns, to be honest. Left shoulder at 12,400. Oh, do you mean the really big picture like that? Oh, okay, yeah. We'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so here we go. Here's the DAX trend again. We saw the big move Tuesday, Wednesday. The market has been coming off since then, but interestingly, it's been a fairly quiet couple of days. We haven't taken out the lows around about 12,200. You can see just how quiet today has been. Actually, this is today. These four candles here, well within the range from yesterday. So a really quiet day so far. So again, for short-term trade in the DAX, I'll be looking at yesterday's low, 12,240. We've got lows back here at 12,200. So the stock markets do feel a little bit drifty. Maybe we won't get much direction for European markets until the US opens, but I'd still be tempted to look for buying opportunities. Just going back to that question, I don't think we've got monthly candles, but I suppose what you're talking about is this, isn't it? This shoulder, head, shoulder. Is it that sort of move that we're looking at? I think. Let me just look at the numbers again. Yeah. Left shoulder, 12.4, 13.6. I mean, you could, but I mean, I'm not a massive fan of these sort of patterns. But if you make money from them, fair enough. But for me, I find them really hard to spot. And you could say, you would say, I think, that it has been invalidated by the fact that the market has pushed up back above the neckline. So for me, if that was a head and shoulders or a triple top or whatever we want to call it, it has been invalidated. But well, let's see. Let's see what happens. I mean, clearly we do have some resistance on the DAX coming in a little bit higher than where we are now, 400 points higher. But if that's the wrong head and shoulders, apologies for that. But I really am terrible at spotting these things. And then finally, the FTSE. Then we'll look at gold. Then we'll look at other markets that people want to have a look at. So FTSE 100. Here we go. So FTSE. I mean, I think these stock markets are interesting because at least they're giving up some gains in recent days, rather than just going up like a rocket. So there's the FTSE. So again, we're on the third down day for the FTSE. We saw new highs for the year on Tuesday, up above 7,500. It's giving it up a bit over the last couple of days. But again, we've got a bit of support coming in. These old levels, these are quite big levels for the FTSE. The lows for April running from 73.70 through to about 7,400. So I think, arguably the aggressive trade for the FTSE down here is to treat the break through yesterday's low as a false break. So this move, say it's overshot yesterday's low a bit, be a buyer, and then stop losses, maybe the other side of 73.90 or 73.70. That's the aggressive trade. The more patient trade, I think, is to wait till Monday, wait to see how it finishes today. But I think it's interesting, that stock markets are giving up some of these gains recently. What else did I say I was going to do? That was it, wasn't it? Bitcoin. So we'll just do Bitcoin, then we'll do gold. Actually, then we're done. So Bitcoin. I was reading some forums yesterday about Bitcoin. Oh my God, I'm not a fan of these cryptocurrency things, but I do think it's interesting at the moment. But just because the market drops, I mean, in Bitcoin drops $500, and there's all sorts of conspiracy theories. I mean, Bitcoin moving $500 at the moment, it's not a major move because it's a crazy currency, but I think the amount of just crazy blind faith and conspiracies around what's moving the market is amusing. But I think it's interesting. I think, I said when we were looking at Bitcoin earlier this week, this move that we've seen in early April, I think this is a major move for Bitcoin. We've seen plenty of dead cat bounces along the way, right? But this move, we have the lows in place in December. It's taken out the old highs at 4150, 4400, blah, blah, blah. It's broken out. It has pushed a little bit higher. It pushed a little bit higher again this week. So actually, I think there's definitely an argument to be a buyer on dips. So for me, arguably the clonking it took yesterday looks like a buying opportunity. So should we do it? I think, let's do it. I think I do have a trade running on there from ages ago. So let's do a little trade on Bitcoin. So let's say, where are we? 51.64. So let's put our stop losses. So it's going to be a 10% stop loss effectively. The other side of 4,600. Let me just shuffle my screen around a little bit and let's place this trade. I need to just change the scale. So how many are we going to buy? So close at a loss. What did I say? I said 4,600, didn't I? Let's say 4,550 is where our stop's going to be. And then when we log on next week, it's 25,000. It's going to be a fantastic trade. So 4,550. So my risk there is 40 quid. So let's make it, I think I've got another, let's make it 25 quid. Let's not go crazy. So 0.05 of a Bitcoin. There we go, perfect. Right, fingers crossed, here we go. Buy, done. Excellent. Let's see how that one works out. And here's this, I don't know if you remember this, if you've been attending these for a while, there's that one we did on Palladium that we did on the 29th of March. And it has moved into profit, but let's just take a look at Palladium and see what's been happening with that. Palladium. There we go. I don't think that much has happened, to be honest, but let's just take a look at that. Because I think we bought in here because we'd had that ridiculous, it's just been a crazy market. It's just gone up and up and up, the price of Palladium, and it got clobbered. So I bought in and stopped below 13,000. It's trying to move higher. So even though we're slightly in profit, it's not that convincing, really. I don't think it really needs to get a move on through 1450. Anyway, what are we doing? So let's get to gold. Then the questions. Sorry, so a quick look at gold. Gold has been recovering over the last couple of days, and I think it's interesting. The big picture on gold. We're still in this recovery from August. So this is gold US dollar. And I think I was saying on Wednesday, it's sort of the last chance saloon really for gold. If it's going to rally, it needs to get a move on. Clearly, it was listening, because the last 3 days we have seen some strength, and I think this is the level here, 1260, the lows for the year. So if I was a buyer now at 1280, whatever it is, 81, the closest I want my stop is the other side of 1260. Really looking for this recovery to hold and a push back up above 1300. I don't think it's going to do it in a straight line. It wouldn't surprise me if we had a bit more choppy trading on gold next week. Let's see what happens. But this 1260, I think, looks like the line in the sand for gold. But for now, that recovery just about hanging on in there. Okay, let's look at the questions. Do you think a short on Manchester United is on the cards? I've got absolutely no idea. They're not doing very well at the moment, are they? I know that much. Oh, I haven't got it in here. Hang on a second. We don't list them yet. Let's add it to the wish list and see if we can add it in. But I will have a look on something else. Hang on, and we'll have a look at it. What is it? What's the code? Man U, is it? I don't know. I think because I was looking at it early this week, because the Juventus share price got clobbered, didn't it? Because they got beaten by Ajax, the Dutch team. That is the limit of my football knowledge. But so their share price dropped 23% when they got beaten. But I also read when they signed Ronaldo last year, who was a famous footballer, for those of you who don't know, they sold $60 million worth of merchandise, Juventus, in the first 24 hours. Anyway, there's Man United. That looks pretty boring to me. It's boring for years, isn't it? But when it comes to the market, 2012 at about $14 a share, so it's listed in the US. Pretty flat for years. A bit of excitement there, whatever that was for, last August. And now we just, personally, I wouldn't even bother. But I suppose, if you want to go short at $19.50 a share, where's your stop go? The closest I'd want it, let's just zoom it right in, is up above maybe these April highs. But it just looks just a little bit choppy chop to me. Let's have a look. Have we got Juventus on here? Juventus FC. Let's have a quick look at those. Here we go. This is a bit more exciting as football shares go. But there's the move. So they were trading at, I think it must be euros, 170 euros a share. They lost that game to Ajax, and then bang, the next day opened at 130. I suppose that's interesting if you think the move is overdone and they're going to do okay. Who knows? I don't know what I'm talking about. There we go. Let's see. Tesla. Let's have a look at Tesla. Tesla, because their losses were worse than expected in the end, weren't they? So Tesla losses were, for the last quarter, $700 million, which was worse than expected. So their share price yesterday, this really is, I think this looks like bounce or bust time for Tesla. This is pretty much the lowest they've been. Suppose if we look at the extremes down here, we're on at least 12-month lows for Tesla, but we're also pretty much where it was trading back in 2014. So if you bought Tesla shares 5 years ago, they're back there. So I think, is there a point where investors are going to lose faith? And maybe the risk is the mainstream manufacturers, the Fords, the BMWs, the Volkswagens, start catching up and eating in, to Tesla's domination of that market. So, but if you, for the brave, the trade here is you're a buyer. We are back down to the low, or the mid 200s, and whenever we've seen Tesla down here, we've seen the buyers step back up. So I think this is a really interesting one as well to watch this afternoon, and into next week. Let's come back to it next week as well, because if it starts edging through that 240 level, are we going to see people start to throw in the towel on the shares? And I think we could do, So I think the next couple of weeks could be interesting for Tesla, but I suppose the absolute aggressive trade is to be a buyer into this and then close your eyes, or have a stop loss, maybe somewhere the other side of 240, and see what happens. Let's take a quick look on the short-term chart. What does it look like? There we go. So pretty relentless selling yesterday. So it looks like it, because when did they report? Was it Wednesday night they reported? So this was after the market closed. So there's the reaction. So it closed at 260 pretty much, opens at 254, and we're just under pressure all day yesterday. So there we go. So just have a quick look at Facebook while we're on US stocks. That's a massive move, because I think its sales up 26% or something ridiculous. But we saw, look at a gap yesterday on Facebook. Let's put that as a daily chart. Here we go. So they closed on Wednesday at 182 a share, opened yesterday at 196. So it's and not surprisingly, I would say, got sold into all day. And I say again that's maybe not a bad idea if you see, a really exuberant opening like that. Maybe we want to wait for some weakness, sell into it, and a stop loss above. But again, it'd be an interesting one to watch today. Well supported at 192 yesterday, but this massive, relatively speaking, pop higher for Facebook, and the same sort of thing last time we had numbers end of Jan. So it's an interesting one to watch, I think. Right, what are we talking about? Pinterest recently floated, haven't they? I think. Pinterest, there we go. Let's look at those. We've got absolutely stacks of data here. There we go. So let's zoom that across. Based on that chart, the trend is up. Okay, based on the 5 days of data we have. It's interesting actually. That's done all right, isn't it? So it started trading at $23 and it's 28. So based on that, we'd have to be a buyer. And I'd be looking at the hourly chart. So I don't know. I mean, there's not much to go on there, is there? But anyway, it'd be if we get a bit of weakness, this is when it starts to look interesting. Let's see where we see the buyers come back in. So maybe let's come back to it in a week's time when we have double the amount of data that we have now. And the other one, of course, is Lyft. There's a lot of talk about Uber coming to the market soon in May. I think it's going to be. But Lyft was the other ride-sharing business that floated end of March. And you can see the reaction. It debuted at 87, and it's currently trading at 56, pretty much on the lows since it floated. So it's going to be really interesting when this Uber IPO, assuming it goes ahead, it's going to happen in May, early May, we think. So it'll be interesting to see what the market does. Blah, blah, blah. Australian dollar, US dollar. Aussie dollar, US dollar. Aussie dollar. Let's have a look at that. It's a daily chart. I would be a buyer, actually. I suppose again. I mean, this is linking in to that US dollar index strength, isn't it? So the US dollar index strength over the last 3 days, as the dollar goes up, everything against the dollar goes down. So we're seeing here clearly a falling value of the Australian dollar as the US dollar index went up. But again, I suppose the aggressive trade, you could take the view that yesterday's push. Let's flip it over to an hourly. Yesterday's push to those lows here, the lows from March, is overdone. I mean, it has spiked back quite a bit. So I think the aggressive trade is to be a buyer, stop losses, the other side of the low from yesterday. It's the other side of 69.80, and seeing if it claws back some of those losses. So that's what I think the trade would be there. And I think if it breaks 69.80, then bang, the risk is down we go, because then we'd be seeing dollar strength again. So let's see. Mexican peso against the dollar. We do look at this now and again, don't we? It's pretty boring, but whenever the dollar is down around the mid to low 18s against the Mexican peso, we do see a bit of dollar strength. So still, it's pretty flat, but I'd rather be a buyer of the dollar on weakness rather than thinking the Mexican peso is going to stage a massive comeback. FTSE 100, we had a look at that earlier. So if you're watching these live things, I think you can always scroll back on the YouTube thing at the bottom. So we covered that, the FTSE, about 12 minutes, 14 minutes in or something. But sterling yen, the old favorite, sterling yen. Let's take a look at that. GBP, JPY. What do we think? So it's edged a bit lower from where we're looking at this on Wednesday, and we are bang on these old lows now, aren't we? So again, for me, with all the usual caveats about the pound at the moment, that it's a bit of a boring market that just suddenly explodes. It looks like a buy, doesn't it? To me, well, to me it does anyway. If we flip over on the hourlies, we've been oversold down here on the RSI. We've got this big old support now that's been running for 6 weeks around about 143.70, and just this morning between 1 and 2 it did trade down to 143.76, and we've seen the market bounce back 50 points. So for me, look at that. That's clearly has been a big level of support, hasn't it? So I would definitely be tempted to be a buyer with stops the other side of that level. What else? BNP Paribas. BNP Paribas. There we go. French bank. Let's look at that on the dailies. That's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting it's done so badly. Mind you, a lot of these banks haven't. I think RBS, did our RBS results out today? I think the shares have been under a bit of pressure this morning, but let's take a look at that. Oh, a second. Yeah, RBS shares are down about 5%. So let's see where we are. I mean, I think the argument here, I would suggest, and this, I guess this is why you're suggesting it, is that we're seeing that trend reverse. You know, the price of BNP Paribas been under pressure for all of last year. So from 68 euros down to what, 38 by the end. So not, you know, down about 40% last year. And it's interesting what it's doing now. You know, we did have a bit of a slight recovery going on. Let's just pick up on that. Let's do that. Look at a slight recovery going on, and it has had a bit of a move. You know, the middle of April. So for me, that's really interesting. You know, we'll be looking, if we're going to trade this recovery, the obvious place to have a stop loss for me would be below the late March lows at 41, or even better, those early Feb lows at 39. And so the question is, you know, do you want to buy up here, or do I want to buy up here, or do you want to see if it slides back down more to the low 40s? But I think it's really interesting on that to finish on. Haven't looked at that before, but maybe we're seeing this trend in BNP Paribas switch around. Do you know what psychometric tests companies ask you to undertake when interviewed for a junior trader position? Sorry, no, I got no idea. I've never had a psychometric test, I don't think. But no, don't know. Maybe Google it, but I think it's going to vary a lot from company to company. Okay, that's it, isn't it? So what's to watch this afternoon? Dollar index. We got US GDP out at 130. So I'd watch that. So you think that's going to have an impact on the US dollar index? Maybe we'll just see chop until we get that announcement. I think that's an interesting one to watch. Stock markets, particularly the Dow down here. It's moving a little bit higher now, but because, you know, see if these stock markets have a little look at yesterday's lows. So on the Dow, it's 26,300. So I think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on this afternoon. Again, particularly after those GDP numbers. And that's it. How's that little Bitcoin trade doing? Losing money. That's fine. That's going to be like £1,000 profit by Monday. That's not financial advice, obviously. But yeah, so stock market indices and the US dollar, I think, ones to watch this afternoon. We'll wrap things up there as usual. We'll do this all again on Monday. So on Monday, we'll have a look at the levels to watch out for during the week. If you don't have an account, if you go to Capital.com/David, open a real money trading account. We're doing a free 30-minute Skype session one-on-one with me where we talk about trading strategies and risk management and markets to trade, all that sort of stuff. So if you do that and open an account with us, just drop me an email. And my email address is david.jones@Capital.com, and we'll sort out a date for the Skype thing. But otherwise, we'll be back on Monday. If you've watched this and enjoyed this, if you can click that thumbs up thing, because it helps our algorithms on YouTube or whatever they are. And to never miss out, just make sure you're subscribed. Click on the subscribe thing down there and that alarm bell thing, and you get a notification off YouTube every time we go live. But be back on Monday at 10 to see how these markets look going into next week. Have a good weekend, and hopefully see you next week.